Hey folks, Dust here, and it's time to discuss the finale of the IEM Katowice 2019 Major. Of course, it is going to be the grand finals between Astralis and ENCE, and just like my other playoff preview content here on the channel, I'm going to be talking about each team and then talking about the grand finals matchup. Now, like some of the other playoff preview videos I've done, I'm going to just focus on what these teams did in their previous match, which is of course the semifinals matches. And more analysis on Astralis or ENCE, you can check out some of my preview content for the semifinals and quarterfinals, as well as the rest of the major, and of course just some content I've done on Astralis specifically in the past, which I'll link all that stuff in the description below. But again, just going to focus on the semifinals. And we'll start with ENCE, as they were the first team to play today, and of course they played up against Navi. And ENCE were a slight underdog, obviously, coming into this, but they had played so strong since they came 0-2 down in Legend Stage. They had passed a big test by beating Liquid, and if you look at my semifinals preview video, I talked about how this match was going to be really difficult to call, just because these teams had similar map pools. ENCE's players were on really good form. They had shown at Cologne that they could go toe-to-toe with Navi, really close in a best of three, and we really got something very similar here in this semifinals game. So the first match was, of course, on Train. This was the pick of ENCE, which wasn't all surprising considering how strong ENCE had been on the map. And even though Navi have shown quite a lot of ability on Train in the past, ENCE still went with comfort, and it wound up paying off. It didn't start out that way, though. I mean, Navi actually were well out in front when they started on the CT side. At one point, they were up 7-2. But we did see ENCE in the end be able to rattle off 5 of the last 6 rounds to put themselves at a 8-7 score and to keep the game really competitive. Really, this was basically done on just some other outer splits. I mean, we had a couple of situations where Ariel was able to make some big entries on some fast outer plays. X7 was doing really good coming out of Ivy and finding picks he needed, and they were just able to kind of do some trade fragging, particularly towards the outer bomb site, and get a few rounds towards the end to make it 8-7. Now, Navi still did jump up to a 13-9 lead at one point, and then it had it at 14-10, but then we did see ENCE win the last 6 rounds in a row to close out the game, and this was really predicated on the fact that, again, X7 was maintaining Ivy very well on both sides of the map. You did have Aaron Alexa B playing forward on outer, getting some good kills towards ladder room and T connector, and then Alu really came alive in the second half on CT side. He had a really quiet game with the AWP on the T side for ENCE, but really was able to deliver on the second half on the CT side, and they wound up winning this game 16-14. Now, the next map was, of course, Dust 2, which was Navi's pick, surprisingly enough, which I really didn't see coming. I really thought that Navi would avoid Dust 2, as it's their second weakest map after Cash as far as, you know, official results in the offline environment, but they wound up smashing ENCE on that map. I mean, it was really just a super one-sided affair. Navi stomps them. Then we go into a map 3, which of course was going to be none other than Mirage. Now, this game, again, very similar to Train, Navi was able to jump up to a pretty big lead. Again, on their CT side, they went up to a score of 7-3. We did see ENCE eventually make it a little bit closer, making it a 9-6 half, still in favor of Navi. Really, ENCE banked on the fact that they just won pistol and got a 2-0 start. They only won 4 actual rifle rounds, I guess you could say. And really, one of those 4 rounds was actually just a MAC 10 rush on P, so it wasn't really a rifle round. And really, they just struggled to get a whole hell of a lot done. I mean, Simple was having a monster game. He wound up with 32 kills on this game, in fact. But yeah, he was just really dominating them, and they just couldn't get anything going. They really like to do that fast A split play through connector pressure and coming up A ramp, and it just didn't work the majority of the time. And so they found themselves with not many rounds. And then Navi jumps up to a 12-6 lead because they won pistol second half. But then we see 7 rounds in a row coming out of ENCE on the CT side to make it to where they have a 13-12 lead. We had a couple of rounds exchanged, but eventually ENCE won the last 2 rounds to wind up winning this game, also at 16-14. And really how this worked out is I felt like ENCE was really good at playing aggressive on the CT side. You had rounds where couple players would push top middle, get a kill on Navi, kind of fade back, and just went out the round with man advantage. Alexi B pushing off Catwalk had a couple of really big rounds. He had one round where he killed a couple of people in the back coming up connector. He had a really clutch round retaking the A bomb site one time. And then, of course, everyone remembers the X7 1v1 clutch against Simple at 13-13, which is also quite huge. So some really good clutch play from a couple of players and some really good aggression, you know, all across the map, whether it be Alu pushing past with an op or what Alexi B was doing off the Catwalk. Really good stuff there, and they wound up winning the series and upsetting Navi. So tip your hat to ENCE. No matter what happens in this finals, they've beaten Liquid and Navi. They've run the gauntlet. They've been on the difficult side of the bracket. They were underdogs in both games, and they came out on top both times anyway. All of their players are playing fucking excellent right now. Sergey has come alive again and gotten back to old form. That's really, really nice to see. Alu was quite quiet, throughout this series. If you look at the series overall, he did at least come alive in the second half of Train to contribute and have some impact to really help them win that map. But yeah, he was really missing on Mirage. So this is obviously scaring him against Astralis because you really need Alu. He's one of your star players next to Sergey. At least that's usually how it's been coming into this major. But at this major, dude, the big revelation has been X7. I mean, this guy has typically been a low fragger, more of a supportive figure. He has been slugging away, particularly in this novice series. He was excellent. Ariel and Alexi B, they've usually been pretty good, and they still are living up to that. So that's also great to see. So pretty good firepower across the board. Again, Alu a bit quiet, but it didn't wind up mattering in this case, but it will matter against Astralis. So that's definitely something to keep our eyes on. Now, when it comes to Astralis, they were playing against Made in Brazil, and they wound up 2-0ing this series, Overpass being a hell of a game, though. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but then obviously having a one-sided win on Inferno. The pick banned for this one exactly about how I thought, with Made in Brazil getting rid of Nuke and Astralis getting rid of Cash. Made in Brazil actually picked into Overpass instead of Train, which was a little bit less than what I expected. I thought maybe Made in Brazil would go for Train just because we saw them successful on it earlier in the tournament, but they didn't. They went for Overpass. Astralis picked Inferno. Really no surprise there. And the rest doesn't matter because we never got to a third map. But on Overpass, look, I'll say this. I was actually quite impressed with Made in Brazil's T side. I mean, you have to understand that Astralis won the pistol in the first half, and actually they won pistol second half. They got a 4-0 start in the first half, a 3-0 start in the second half off of both winning pistols. So that's 7 rounds essentially off of winning pistols and like opening gun round, I guess you could say. So really hot starts in both halves. Made in Brazil on the T side recovered though. Despite the fact they were down 0-4, they still wound up winning 9 rounds on the T side. They only dropped 2 rifle rounds essentially once they got their money back in order. Really well played by Made in Brazil. It wasn't even Astralis making mistakes or doing poorly. It was really Made in Brazil just making some really excellent reads in mid-round situations, playing both sides really methodically. Whether they were doing a B hit, they would just do it really in an orchestrated way. Same with their A hits. They just played really, really well. You got to tip your hat to Made in Brazil. They look super sharp on this T side Overpass. It's certainly a good sign for the future, what they were able to do here. But then Astralis just came back with a vengeance on their own T side. Again, winning pistol, getting up 3-0. They reset Made in Brazil so many times in the second half economically. That was a huge factor. Another huge factor was Astralis just had some really clutch plays, man. Also really good, effective, fast-paced B executes that really rattled Made in Brazil's defenses there. They weren't really able to stand up against it. And, even one time they had Fur actually pull off a flank and stuff like that. Astralis caught it. So they just really had a textbook Astralis T side. They're always really known for how great their strategy is. But man, oh man, Made in Brazil just couldn't find it on their CT side. And then Inferno, such a lopsided affair. I mean, really never saw much out of Made in Brazil in this game. I mean, they made a slight comeback in the first half on their CT side, winning 4 out of the last 5 rounds. But I mean, Astralis was up 5-0 at one point. They were up 8-2 at one point on their T side. They just absolutely dominated Made in Brazil's defense. This continues to be a problem for Made in Brazil. During the time with Stewie and Tarek, their Inferno actually massively improved, and their CT sides was a big reason for that. But back on the Phelps lineup in 2017, Inferno was a big problem for this team, particularly the CT sides, and this is still coming up for them on Inferno. Just couldn't really put a stop to Astralis' attack, and really in the second half, they only won 1 round on their T side. I mean, Astralis is cleaned up on the CT. I mean, just really good holds. May just continues to be the best pit player in CSGO right now, with a couple of A holds. Had some help, obviously, and just really good series overall. I mean, for Made in Brazil, again, some good signs that they played better T side on Overpass. Phelps actually had a pretty good series here overall, especially compared to some of his other games throughout the tournament. So that's obviously a good sign. I expect we'll see some good things from Made in Brazil in the future, but Astralis is just too damn good. They are the real final boss. And what I mean by that is going into this finals, Astralis has now made 14 finals out of the 18 LAN events they've attended with this lineup. Now, you also have to understand that one of their top 4 finishes, and the only time they place outside of the top 4, which is their first event together, that happens in their first 2 events, right? So actually, in the past 16 events they've attended, they've made 14 finals, and they've won 10 titles so far. They could win their 11th out of 14 finals appearances if they're able to go ahead and beat ENCE in the grand finals. They continue to just have massive win rates. I mean, they've now played 175 or maybe 176, somewhere in that range of maps played, and they have like a 78 to 79% map win rating. they're now approaching like 56 or 57 best of threes as they go into this ENCE matchup. They've only lost 10 best of threes out of those 55 or 56 or 57, somewhere around that area. I don't have the exact number in front of me. We know how deep their map pool is. We know how good all their players are. This team is just continuing to show domination and continuing to establish their era and just extend it further. As we go into this matchup, Astralis versus ENCE, these teams have only played against each other one time, and that was a long time ago. It was a best of one. This was at ESL1 Cologne back in July of 2018. Somehow or another, it wound up going to Nuke in a best of one, and Astralis did dominate that with 13 rounds in the first half on the T side, and then they just wound up winning the game 16-5 overall. That's the only head-to-head history between these two teams. And what you'll find is that ENCE has passed two big tests by beating Liquid and by beating Navi. But Astralis is a whole different beast. Their roles are much more well-defined. They're much better with their defaults. They're just so well drilled. Their foundation is just so solid. And then they just have a deeper playbook. They have gimmicky nade stacks. They have innovative executes. They just have coordination. They're so fantastic in the clutch, not just Sipix. Even Device can be great in the clutch. Other players can play so well, and they can go in different areas in a map pool than other teams can. And they just have that level of perfection and sharpness and fine-tuned play that other teams don't have. So this is a situation where it is a real, David versus Goliath type thing. I mean, yeah, sure, ENCE has beaten some really big opponents as an underdog, but this is a much bigger gap. Astralis is, like I talked about, their map win rates, their best of 3 win rates, how deep their map pool is, how good their players are competing right now. This is just a much taller mountain to climb. Props to ENCE for coming this far. No matter what happens in this finals, they have so much to be proud of, and ENCE will definitely be a team to keep an eye on. But against Astralis, it's just a whole different beast. As far as how I think it'll shake down, when it comes to the map pick ban, it'll be interesting because ENCE has pretty much banned Cash every time. That is their permaban. The exception was obviously the Navi series that they just played because they knew that Navi didn't play Cash, so they actually banned Overpass instead. Since they're going against Astralis, who does not play Cash, Astralis actually known for banning Cash, I think ENCE will do something similar that they did with Navi, where they'll float Cash. They won't ban it, and they'll ban something else first. What I hope they will ban is Nuke, just because I don't see how the fuck you're going to beat Astralis on Nuke. No one can. They are 29-0, the second longest map winning streak in CSGO history. I don't see how you could possibly look to allow Nuke through. The only other ban that would make sense is, I don't know that they would even ban Overpass again, because I don't think Astralis would pick into Overpass. I think Astralis would be fine playing it as like a third map or something, maybe, but that has been at times a weakness for them, and so I don't think that they're at risk to first pick Overpass. And ENCE have played Overpass a little bit in this major. They look like they've adopted it somewhat. So what I think will happen is that ENCE should ban Nuke. I just don't see why you wouldn't. Now, if you're Astralis, you know that ENCE is probably not really a threat to pick Cash, and so I think that they should be looking to probably ban Train, just because that is ENCE's strongest map statistically. Maybe Astralis thinks about banning Mirage. That could be another option, just because that has been a bit shaky at times for Astralis, whereas ENCE, that's probably their next best map after Train. So unless you want to maybe consider D2R Inferno. So when you think about it that way, I think Astralis should be probably looking to get rid of Train. Maybe they'll look to a Mirage or something like that as well. I'm not really sure. With that in mind, when it comes to picks, I think, Astralis obviously not going to be able to pick Nuke because that should get banned. I think they'll probably just go for comfort in something like Inferno. They're oh so dominant on that. They also could maybe look to go to Overpass if it's available. If they do sense weakness in ENCE's Overpass or something like that. They also could go for maybe a Dust 2 because they do have a lot of comfort there. But ENCE actually, outside of this major, have really shown a lot of value on Dust 2. So I don't think that it's really something Astralis are going to want to play into. So I would just go ahead and expect Astralis to pick Inferno, but they can go any direction they want to because their map pool is so deep. If I'm ENCE, again, I think that, if Astralis doesn't ban Train, you should probably go ahead and pick Train. That's probably your bet. If Astralis goes ahead and bans Train, you could try to fucking ninja pick a Cash and really gamble and really hope that maybe you can play it. I mean, I have seen them play Cash a couple of times and win it a couple of times, like when they beat Optic at Starladder Season 6. They actually seem like a functional team on Cash. But, I mean, the couple of times that Astralis have had to play Cash, they've also looked like a quite functional team. So maybe that isn't the gamble you want to take. Again, if Train's available, I would take it. If not, I think ENCE probably should be looking the direction of Mirage, to be 100% honest. That's what I'm thinking. And then for a third map situation, I mean, again, Both teams are willing to probably play Inferno. Maybe if ENCE respects Astralis enough, they'll second ban Inferno. Probably Astralis just goes ahead and second bans Cash because they don't want to see that as a third map. So that's kind of the direction I'm leaning towards. As far as who wins, why wouldn't it be Astralis? I mean, I think that it's really hard to objectively say anything otherwise. And I think ENCE has passed some big tests. They've done great, but Astralis is, again, just a whole different mountain to climb, a whole different obstacle to move past, and I don't think this is their time to do it. It would be so fucking insane if they did. It would be one of the craziest major runs, might be the craziest major run in CSGO history if they were able to pull it off. I mean, at least Cloud9, while they might have fluke phased in the finals of E-League Boston, the other teams they beat in the playoff run were teams that they reasonably could be expected to beat because they had beaten them in the past in other offline environments leading up to that major. But this would be just a whole different level of making a crazy dark horse run if ENCE were able to win it. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hope you folks enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe for more content. Catch you next time.